Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing well. Well, we're on part 4 of our story, and we've learnt about a young lady who went against a witness protection program because she wanted to be independent. She wanted to live her own life and she didn't want to listen to her advisors, and she chose to move to a small town. And now she's very worried that a former boyfriend that she chose to get in touch with, also against the advice of the witness protection program, has led these scoundrels to her front door. And we're about to find out if she's right about that. So let's continue with our story. Every morning Susan would get up really early for her morning jog. She'd found the perfect footpath at the end of the cul-de-sac on the street that led through acres and acres of sprawling woods. There were lots of footpaths to take, but she chose one that she used every single day. It was the perfect place to stretch her legs out, to let her hair down without being the object of anybody's scrutiny. Susan found that jogging helped her to abandon all her troubles for a while and let them go, almost as if for a brief moment she could become somebody else that was not plagued with so much disquiet. Jogging kept her sane, as did speaking to her parents regularly on a burner phone, as they were also in hiding. They were very glad that Dirk Underwood had got his just deserts and would be rotting away in prison for the rest of his life and would never see the light of day again. It would seem they thought that Susan had lost leave of her senses, moving to the small town, but it was something she had wanted to do, especially after falling in love with the dreamy cottage that she had seen online. It was such a perfect cottage, exactly what she'd always wanted, and she didn't believe that she had stumbled on it by chance. She didn't believe in things like that. She believed in serendipity, and she couldn't help but wonder if in some way her deceased brother Simon had beckoned to her from beyond the grave, indicating that this cottage was calling her name and was meant for her. Sometimes even fate could give you a nudge in the right direction. The young man who had posted the cottage online to sell as soon as he possibly could had been very honest and upfront with Susan, told her that his mother had owned the property and had died in the front yard from a terrified reaction to a rat of all things. And Susan was sure she could feel the old lady's nurturing presence around her, which was oddly reassuring, even if it was probably all in her head. "I don't understand, love, why you bought that cottage, dear. On the spur of the moment like that. It's absolute madness, complete madness. You know that this is not a good idea in the circumstances. I'm sure the place is perfectly lovely, bewitching even. But I'm sorry, love, you're drawing attention to yourself. You really are. In my experience, people in small towns can't help themselves but talk. They're going to find it very strange that you move to their town on a whim like this. You don't work. You keep yourself privately to yourself. Many tongues will be wagging. Let me tell you, I know. People will ask impertinent questions. It can become incredibly awkward for you. Me and your father haven't gone through all of this insufferable identity change to lose you like this. We've already lost Simon. We can't lose you as well, my dear. My heart just can't stand it." "Ma'am, I simply just cannot live under that program anymore. You don't know how it makes me feel. I feel completely suffocated. Surely you realize that." "We all feel suffocated, love. This is not a very pleasant experience for any of us. But you've got a price on your head. You can't ignore that fact. You do what you have to do to survive." "Ma'am, I've been incredibly careful. What do you expect me to do?" "I expect you to remain on the program, love, not to cause such pandemonium and chaos in your wake. Everybody is terribly upset with you. I hope you know what you've done. They've never experienced anyone as headstrong as you before. You want to do your own thing, despite and to hell with the consequences. I'm sorry, love. Your attitude stinks. Sometimes you can be incredibly naive. That's all I'm going to say. Ma'am, I'm prepared to take a risk and live my life the way I want to. I want to be free. I don't want to be answerable to anybody. But you are never free, love. You'll be always looking over your shoulders, no matter where you live. The only time you will ever be free is when Dirk Underwood himself is dead. And by the sounds of things, that ain't going to be happening for a very long time. Beyond everything else, love, you've moved back to New York State. I mean, of all the places in the world to move, and I don't care how large a state it is. You put yourself right under the radar of those heavy-duty thugs. And I just don't understand you at all. I cannot believe that you got in touch with Ryan again. I mean, of all the stupid and foolish things to do, that has got to be the most dangerous. I mean, sometimes I wonder, love, if you have a death wish or something. You know the rules of the program. You were never supposed to contact anyone from your past, to leave a trail behind you. It's not worth the risk. What do you think you were doing? Oh, Mum, please stop going on. I love him. Do you really expect me to give him up? Yes, love, I do. Sometimes you do what you have to do. This is not worth risking your life over. Those minions work for Dirk Underwood, outside the prison, and they're around, believe me, they are. And they will be watching Ryan's every single move. I hope you realize that. These people have eyes in the back of their head. They don't miss a trick. And God forbid, if they caught up with you, love, which is a very real possibility, if Ryan leads them directly to you. I don't even want to think about what they will do to you. The idea makes my skin crawl. Believe me, love, killing you quickly would be a merciful thing to do, and they will spare you no mercy. They will kill you as slowly as possible to maximize your pain. Do you understand that? Do you even comprehend what these men are capable of? They're animals, love. They're not human. Ma'am, don't you think I don't know that? I was Dirk Underwood's girlfriend for a while, do you not remember? He told me everything he did. I can't believe how evil he was. I'm not naive as you keep saying I am. I know what these people are like. I know how dangerous my life is. Wherever I go, I've got to watch my back. I am in danger. But you know what? Sometimes it's worth the risk living like this, because at least I'm freer than I ever was under the program. And yes, they might think I'm insufferable, and they might think I'm headstrong and mulishly stubborn. But you know what? I don't care what they think. I need to do what's right for me, Mum. And I really don't want to meditate on all the things that could go wrong. Because you know what? It's all I ever think about. It's what consumes my every thought. I'm always living, Mum, on tender hooks, always afraid of what tomorrow might hold. But you know what? I'd rather live like this than the way I was living before. You wouldn't have to, love, if you hadn't rebelled against the program the way you did. I mean, at the very least, you could have moved into a very busy area with a high populace, for goodness sake. But no, you couldn't even do that. I mean, I spoke to the advisors and they said to me that they can't stop you from doing what you want because you're a free person. But look at you. What are you like? Mr. Woebegone. Oh, he said he couldn't force you to do anything you didn't want. But I wish he could do something. I mean, you were in witness protection for your own good, love. But he couldn't force you to remain on the program. You're free to make your own choices. But you know what else he told me? No, go on. You're dying to tell me. Say it. Do I have to hear it anyway? Yes, I think you do, love, for your own good. He said he wouldn't even give you 6 months on the outside. That something would likely happen to you to expose your whereabouts. He wasn't happy that you've been in touch with Ryan. He said that is going to be incredibly dangerous, being in touch with him. That's all I can say, love. He said all that, did he? Yes, love, he did. How do you think it made me feel? Your father was beside himself, but I won't go on about that now. I hate to say it, But he's right, that man is. He knows what he's talking about. He's been doing the witness protection program for a very long time. He knows about those wicked, duplicitous people. They will stop at nothing to find you. And then they will punish you, love, for testifying against Dirk Underwood. That sounds ominous. That's an understatement, love. I was devastated, absolutely devastated. If I lose you, Susan, I lose my will to live. I hope you realize that. Be this on your own back. I hope you can live with that. You can't do this to us, love. Do you know I can't sleep at night? I worry about you so much. Please come back on the program. Put that cottage on the market. Mum, don't be so dramatic. And even if I was killed by Dirk Underwood's minions, at least you would always know that I'd made my own free choices in the end. That should be a God-given right to us all, don't you think? To be free to make our own choices. I mean, why should I be imprisoned in my own life for what Dirk Underwood did to Simon? Why must I pay for his crime by losing my freedom as well? I've lost so much already. My brother, my friends, my former appearance, seeing you and Dad as often as I would have liked. And by the looks of things, I may have even lost Ryan. Why should I lose all this? Everything I love, because of that cold-hearted thug. I hate him. I hope he rots in hell. What do you think it feels like, Mum, to look in the mirror every single morning and to be staring back at a face that no longer I recognise? I miss my blonde hair and my slightly pointed off-centred nose. I can't believe I'm saying that, because I used to hate that old nose of mine. Now I think it was cute, but I can never have that nose back. I can never have my old looks back again. I have even gone so far as to bake my skin in the sun to alleviate my former fair complexion, at the very high risk of getting skin cancer. And I liked my skin fair. I suited fair skin. I don't like looking like a roasted pumpkin, but I've done everything I can think of, and it's still not enough, is it? I rue the day that I ever testified in court against that man. Why didn't somebody warn me what would happen as a consequence of this? I never knew how high the cost would be, that I'd have to pay for my own personal freedom, just to put that man behind bars. I feel exactly like a tiger in a cage, as if I'm trapped in my own life. I can't do this anymore. I just can't, Mum. I'm always looking over my shoulder, always feeling afraid. When is it ever going to stop? Well, love, it's what we're all in for at the moment. Me and your father understand your frustration. We really do. But we're very proud of you at the same time. What you did on behalf of Simon, even though he is no longer with us, was incredibly brave. You stood up against the vindictive evil man and his atrocities, and that you should be very, very proud of. And you put him behind bars. Don't forget that in a hurry. I just wish you weren't so obstinate, Susan. I think your frustration has rubbed off on your father as well. Honestly, the two of you were driving me completely potty, and you're making this terribly difficult. Your father is now threatening to break free from the program as well. He's had enough. The Witness Protection Program are thinking of relocating us to live in a heavily populated area, to merge very slowly and progressively into society there, which will give us more freedom. But I'm not happy about it. I feel a lot safer where we are right now. Susan knew her mother was absolutely right. Her mother was definitely the sane one in their family. There was a restless stubbornness to her character that she definitely inherited from her father's side of the family, which gave her a desire to make a brand new life for herself in this small town. And she was determined that come hell or high water, she'd make it work. Maybe she should take Ryan's advice, be more friendly to the locals, make up some cock and bull fictitious story about having escaped a rather abusive family, and being a writer looking for a private retreat to be inspired to write articles for a science magazine. Could she pull it off, she wondered. She wasn't sure, but she had to give it a bash. At least the locals would then have something to chew on, before she drew even more unwanted attention to herself. The following morning, after her rather sombre conversation with her mother, Susan got up early for her routine jog. She was filled with what she could only describe as a growing sense of trepidation and unease. She wasn't sure whether her mother's cautionary words had struck a chord with her, so that now she was doubting her ambitiously courageous decision to live in this small town. However, on this morning, other things were at play, almost as if something or someone was trying to urge her not to leave her property this morning. For starters, she had been unable to find her front door key, which she always left on the hook next to the door. But on this morning, she found it after a frantic search. It had fallen under the hall table and was hiding in such an obscure position, almost as if someone had deliberately placed it there so that she would not see it. Luckily, she had found it. It had never fallen off the hook like this before and disappeared from plain sight. "Don't be ridiculous," she scolded herself. "You're reading far too much into this. You always overthink things, Susan. You can't keep living on tender hooks like this. It'll drive you mad. You know you need this morning jog. It'll help you relax." But even as she left the house for her jog, a nagging little voice in her head kept urging her to go back home. But she chose to ignore it, as her desire to go for a jog was like an itch she needed to scratch, or an unquenchable thirst she needed to satisfy. Before long she was jogging down the cul-de-sac, fully certain that her only witnesses on this early morning were the trees and the shrubs. Little did she realize that her neighbour Lilac Evans had long since been up and about, with Buddy at her side, waiting to discreetly follow her into the woods. Lilac had woken up with a start, in the early hours of the morning, with a sour taste in her mouth, an annoying feeling in her gut that made her feel as if something was terribly wrong, and her thoughts immediately gravitated towards her neighbour, Prt4of4. Was the young lady in danger? Silly question! Of course she's in danger! But there was something in the air that morning, something so palpable, something so awful, that it made her feel that today was the day she needed to pay close attention to the young woman. Lilac had unfortunately never been able to help Mrs. Perkins, her previous next-door neighbour. The old woman had dropped down dead in the front yard, in front of Lilac herself, because of a dreadful, paralysing fear, brought on by an extreme aversion to rats. She could, however, play her small little part in keeping a judicious eye on her next-door neighbour, her new neighbour, Prt4of4. Lilac had watched Petty with her frolicking ponytail bouncing at the back of her neck, running past her cottage. Petty appeared rather apprehensive this morning, more so than usual. Lilac wondered if the young lady could feel a sense of foreboding in the air like she could, which you could practically taste. Lilac had a grandmother who had long since passed away, who had been able to read tea leaves. Her grandmother had told her that Lilac had a gift of clear audience, that she could develop, but Lilac had paid her grandmother's claim no heed. But now this heavy feeling of foreboding in her gut could not be dismissed. Was it some kind of psychic premonition, she wondered? She couldn't be sure. Lilac watched Prt4of4, looking nervously over her shoulders, back towards her cottage, and then at the road ahead of her, as if she was having second thoughts about going out this morning for her jog. Lilac waited for her energetic neighbour to jog past her cottage, but this morning she noticed that Prt4of4 was a little bit out of sorts, and not as energetic as she usually was. But finally she disappeared at the end of the road. Lilac gingerly followed her close behind, with a bottle of mace tucked away neatly in her pocket. She walked towards the end of the cul-de-sac, with Buddy by her side, and as she ambled up the hill, she observed two dark silhouettes. They were two male figures, disappearing very cautiously into the woods. There was little doubt that they were following Prt4of4, with duplicitous intent. Everything about their mannerisms and movements told Lilac that these young men were unsavoury characters. Lilac gasped, for she noted in their hands they appeared to be carrying hunting rifles. They moved clandestinely through the trees, signalling to each other. They looked incredibly furtive. I knew it. I just knew it. They're after that young lady. I've got to stop them. They can't hurt my new next-door neighbour." Lilac was in two minds about whether she should call the police or not, but the decision was taken out of her hands when, after fumbling around in her jacket pocket, she realised that she'd all but left her cell phone at home on the kitchen table. Running back to get it would take far too much time. By the time she got back to the cottage and called for help, Petty could potentially be dead. It must have been that Ryan, she thought. The visitor that she suspected was Petty's boyfriend, had arrived at Wispy Wind Cottage the other day to see Petty. Petty had not been remotely amused to see him, and had seemed rather paranoid that he might have been followed by unscrupulous men who wished to harm her by way of revenge. "Silly man," thought Lilac, shaking her head. "Silly, silly man. He must have inadvertently led those scoundrels right to Petty's doorstep. So much for changing her appearance with plastic surgery. They obviously know it's the woman they're looking for. I wouldn't be remotely surprised if they'd been following her around, establishing her daily routine." Lilac, who appreciated the urgency of Petty's plight, quickly stepped up her pace, with Buddy still on the lead, who seemed rather surprised at the speed they were going at, into the woods. But he was a good dog, and seemed to be behaving himself this morning. Lilac was out of breath by the time she heard the voices. With Buddy at her side, she beckoned for him to be quiet, and he obeyed. Lilac crouched behind a tree to eavesdrop on the conversation, and to get a better view of both men, who looked objectionably unpleasant, the kind of unwholesome, repugnant people you'd definitely not want to meet in a dark alley on a lonely night. They looked like villainous, degenerate gangsters that had ill intent. "Hello there, Susan Nettles. It's good to see you. Been a long time, hasn't it?" One of the men had Susan thrown onto the ground, lying flat on her back, with his heavy-weighted boot over her chest and his rifle pressed under her neck, while she stared up at him with terrified eyes. "I have no idea who you are or what you want, but my name is Petty. I'm not the Susan that you speak of, and I've never ever changed my appearance before, nor have I ever been under the knife for plastic surgery. I'm telling you, you've got the wrong person. I don't know a Dirk Underwood, never heard of him before, and I'm not responsible for putting anybody in jail. I can't think what you're talking about, but you've clearly got the wrong person." "Look at her, Kirk. Lies as if her pants are on fire. No wonder Dirk Underwood was taken in by her. If you must know, Susan, your lover boy led us straight to your cosy little cottage. What's his name again? Ah, yes, Ryan Wendell. Goodness gracious, that young man doesn't know when he's being followed, does he? Ryan? You're talking about Ryan. He's an old friend of mine. He came to visit me the other day. But he's not a boyfriend of mine. We've never dated. We're just good friends, that's all." "He was your boyfriend, lady. Now don't you lie to me. You went out with him for 8 years before you seduced Dirk Underwood. You fooled him, didn't you, by pretending to be his girl? But all the time you wanted to betray him because he killed your brother Simon. Isn't that right? Your brother Simon deserved to die. He messed Dirk Underwood around. It wasn't personal. Those are the rules of the cartel. The trouble is, young lady, when you mess with the likes of Dirk Underwood, you try to outsmart him. It's never going to work. He's too clever. We all are. We don't miss a trick. You hear that?" "I can't think what you're talking about. You've got me confused with somebody else. I've never dated a Dirk Underwood before. And Ryan Wendell, I admit I know him. He's a good friend of mine, that's all. You must have your wires crossed somewhere along the line. Please let me go. You're hurting me. I can hardly breathe, with your boot all over my chest. Get off me, will you?" For a moment Lilac saw a touch of doubt in the men's faces, and in that second she knew what she needed to do, to escalate their uncertainty. With a cocky assertiveness that was all bravado on her part, she boldly meandered through the trees with Buddy at her side, who began to bark wildly. at the two men, as if they were intruders that had broken into Lilacs' cottage. Buddy did not like these two men one little bit. He could sense they were evil. Her golden retriever was snarling at them, baring his canine teeth in a threatening posture. One of the men was wearing a brown and black striped shirt, rolled up at the sleeves, along with a pair of matching chinos. He pointed his rifle at Lilac. "I like dogs, ma'am, to an extent, but not yours. I don't like your dog. And if you don't get him to bloody shut up, I'll blow his brains out. Do you understand? Buddy, go home, will you? Go home, Buddy." The dog immediately darted out of the grove of trees. Lilac had certainly trained him well. "Put that thing down, young man, will you?" said Lilac, looking at his rifle. "I'm old enough to be your mother. Have you no respect for senior citizens? I'd like to know what you're doing with my daughter. Would you get your boot off her now? You're crushing her chest. You're hurting her. What the hell do you think you're doing with her? What has she ever done to you?" "Your daughter?" asked one of the men, raising a brow. "This is your daughter? Is this some joke, ma'am?" "Of course this is not a joke. She's my daughter. Her name is Prt4of4, although some people call us Wayncroft, because people get confused, you see. It was Evans before she married that loser husband of hers, and they got divorced. She lives right next door to me at Wispy Wind Cottage, if you must know. We're very close, that's why we live close to each other. I don't know what you want with my daughter, but I overheard you talking about drugs. For your information, my young daughter has never taken a drug in her life. She's never had cosmetic surgery either to change her appearance. Can you not see she's got my nose? She's my daughter, and she's not called Susan Nettles. Never heard of that woman before." "You bloody fool, Kirk," said the other man, glaring at his hostile-looking companion, who Lilac privately thought had the most evil eyes she'd ever seen. His head was fully shaven, and he had a huge pair of biceps on him that were shown off by a white string vest he was wearing. His body was covered in impressive-looking tattoos. "Did you not check your facts, Kirk? It would be so typical of you to do this to us. You said you were absolutely certain that this woman was Susan Nettles. What if you got the wrong bloody person? What if you got it wrong?" "I am sure it's the right person. They're spinning us a yarn, the two of them. I don't think I got anything wrong. This is Susan Nettles. I know it is, even though it doesn't look like her." Before Lilac could protest, she had also been thrown on the ground, and was lying flat on her back, staring up in bemusement at the two men. "This is not your daughter, is it, ma'am? You're lying to us through your teeth. You're trying to protect this young lady," said Kirk, pressing his heavy boot so hard on Lilac's chest that he squeezed all the oxygen out of her. Lilac felt no fear. She knew there was a very real possibility that these evil men would take them both out. She could tell they'd killed before. There was a hardness to them that left her in no uncertain doubt about that. "How about we kill them both?" said Kirk. "It's no string off our nose. I'm pretty certain this is Susan Nettles. I would put money on it, and if it isn't, too bad. That's what I say. As for this meddling old bat, well, she's surplus to requirements, isn't she? I say we get rid of them both and be done with it." "That's my mother you're talking about," said Petty. "Please don't hurt her. She's done nothing wrong in this. Nothing." Lilac could see Petty's eyes were filled with fear. "You can't kill her. You can't. Do you understand?" Kirk did not answer Susan. His face paled, growing as white as a sheet. His whole body began to tremble. "What is it, Kirk? What the hell is wrong with you?" asked the other man, looking up at his friend's ashen face. "It's a bloody Bigfoot, Stan. He's standing over there between the trees, watching us. He's a bloody giant." "Don't be ridiculous, Kirk. What the hell are you talking about? There's no such thing as Bigfoot. I'm telling you, over there, watching us in those trees. It's a Bigfoot. It's a Bigfoot." "Bloody hell," said Stan, his mouth dropping open. "You're right. It's a Bigfoot. "What are you waiting for, Kirk? You saw it first! Shoot it, for God's sake! Shoot it!" Kirk was trembling as he tried to aim the rifle at the Bigfoot. He was filled with terror. Seconds later he began firing indiscriminately, in a blaze of bullets, one after another, until there was nothing left in his rifle, and Stan did much the same. But every single one of those bullets missed the nimble creature, who simply bounced out of the way, with an agility that was nothing short of incredulous. The Bigfoot could have been 9 foot to 10 foot tall. He had a strapping, ripped physique. He gave the 2 screaming men chase. "Help! Help!" came the voices of the men. "Help! Help! Someone help me!" Lilac had not moved an inch. She sat up on the ground, staring in bewilderment at the scene unfolding before her eyes. Petty was equally as bemused. Her mouth had dropped wide open, her eyes as wide as saucers. Both women were frozen in time, as if they were rooted by their derrieres, anchored to one spot in the ground. Everything happened so very quickly, at the speed of light. Kirk continued to scream, and then he did something really awful. He shoved his friend Stan onto the ground, so the man fell forwards into the Bigfoot's path. But the Bigfoot ran past Stan, and with an overlong hand he grabbed Kirk before the man could escape. Now Kirk was screaming as he looked up into the face of the Bigfoot. "Help! Somebody do something! Help! Please help!" he cried out. "He's going to kill me! Do you hear that? He's going to kill me! Someone help!" Kirk's cries fell on deaf ears, for no one cared about his plight. No one came to his help, for he had never helped anyone that he had lightly killed in the past. The Bigfoot grabbed him by the head, lifted him up in the air like a rag doll, and with one hand twisted the man's neck, so it dangled like the rabbits had done that Lilac had discovered hanging from a branch on her previous walk in the grove. Stan was trying desperately to run away. His eyes were round with terror as he saw the Bigfoot throwing the dead corpse of his friend onto the ground. He knew it was his turn. Stan was pleading with the Bigfoot. He'd picked up a stick off the ground and was waving it around in a threatening way, but the stick was pitifully small and did not intimidate the Bigfoot at all. "Please, don't come near me! Don't come near me! Don't you come near me! No! Don't come near me!" The Bigfoot just whisked him in the air and twisted his neck. He died so easily. The men were now dead on the forest floor, and the Bigfoot threw them both over his shoulders and turned around to look at both Lilac and Petty. What happened next startled the 2 women. "Don't worry," came the voice in their head. "I've got this. These men can't hurt you now. I won't let anything hurt you. I'm the watcher. I look after the woods. I know what goes on here." And with that, the Bigfoot simply glided away, while Lilac and Petty embraced each other. "Thank you," said Petty. "Thank you for what you did, Lilac. You went out on a limb for me. I don't know how to thank you." "I think it's a Bigfoot we need to thank, dear. Certainly not me. But I, for one, am very glad to see the back of those evil men. Hopefully you'll be able to live with more peace in your life, knowing that those 2 thugs are out of the way." 1 month later, Buddy barked excitedly as Lilac navigated her way to the front door. "Oh, Petty, it's you, dear. This is a lovely surprise. I'm so delighted to see you. Do come in." Lilac continued to call Susan her newly acquired name Petty, as no one in town knew who she really was, and Lilac and Petty had become close friends. Lilac kept the young woman's secrets safe. Susan bolted into the cottage. She looked excited. "You're not going to believe it, Lilac. I can barely believe it myself. When I got the phone call, I was in absolute shock." "What is it, dear? I'm intrigued." "Mark Underwood is dead! He's dead, Lilac." "You're kidding me. How on earth did that happen? That is wonderful news." "He died of a stroke. They found him dead in his bed this morning. Do you realize what this means? I'm free, Lilac. I'm really free." The 2 women embraced. Tears poured down Petty's cheeks. Coming to this quiet, unassuming town had really been written in the stars for her. She had already made so many friends. Tongues were no longer wagging, and now she could resume her relationship with Ryan Wendell, and her parents would be free, as the head of the dragon had now been cut off, which meant all the other parts connected to the dragon would wither away into obscurity, and would be interested in the likes of Susan Nettles no more. As for Stan and Kirk, who were Dirk Underwood's minions, they had met with a dreadful end. No signs of their bodies were ever recovered. Lilac and Petty regularly go for walks in the woodgrove. They haven't seen the Bigfoot again, but they have seen rabbits hanging from branches, and if they get close to the Bigfoot's quarry, they are showered with stones. Some things never change. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, isn't that the most incredible story? What a terrifying thing to have to be on a witness protection program and then to rebel against it because you just can't bear to live like that anymore because it's insufferable. And you decide to yourself, you know what? I'd rather live my life in jeopardy than in a prison, because in a way I'm in a prison because of this protection. So what an extraordinary story. And wow, I'm so glad those Bigfoots killed those evil men. Sometimes evil does need to be vanquished, and the best way is to eliminate it, and Bigfoot seemed to realize that. So until next time, goodbye and good night.